Evening, everyone. I am also trying to see myself here. Thank you all for tuning in tonight to the Spokesman Recorder, Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. Oh, lovely. Our Forefront Town Hall series on issues affecting the state of Black Minnesota. My name is Stefanetta Harmon. I'm a contributor and former editor-in-chief for the newspaper. And tonight we're hosting a very important discussion on how we call, acknowledge, and push through trauma while experiencing it in the Black community. Just based on our skin color, we have been subjected to trauma, thinking physical, emotional, and mental, even before George Floyd, before coronavirus, particularly in Minnesota, where the Black community is experiencing some of the country's highest disparities. We saw the city spark a flame for action across the country in response to the cycle of systemic racism, prejudice, and oppression of people of color due to the melanin in our skin. And businesses are now speaking in terms of post-Minneapolis, but we are still in pain. There is no post for us at this moment in time. We are still experiencing COVID as the cases continue to rise. 500 in the past day in Minneapolis alone, 50,000 across the country. We are still in the streets marching as news reports of more deaths, violent acts of racism against us continue to flood our timelines, effectively re-traumatizing us. So while we may look okay, as you see us in the streets, pick up our children, as we go through our daily routines at the grocery stores, but we're not. And some of us are really just barely coping right now, and we don't have the words to explain that kind of hatred or pain even to our children. And so we're here and trying to figure out how we deal with that. And tonight I have three amazing panelists who are on the call with me tonight to explore that. Licensed in clinical mental health fields, Dr. Joy Lewis, author of Healing, the Act of Radical Self-Care. We have Dr. Brandon Jones, psychotherapist, and he's currently the Integrated Services Manager at North Point Health and Wellness Center. Mm-hmm. And we have Catrice Jackson, who's also a licensed mental health practitioner and professional counselor and CEO of Catriceology. And I just want to say welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in tonight and joining us in this conversation so we can really, I know we have an hour to unpack a whole lifetime, but I would love to just, even if we could get to a place where we can start naming where we're at and how we begin this conversation. Dr. Joy, could you lead us in that?
Woo! Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And you know, where are we? I think just starting, I want to just acknowledge that it's holding both heartbreak and joy, right? How do we hold both things? And so I'm gonna start with the joy. I'm gonna start with the joy. I'm gonna start with the joy of just the present moment of getting to be in this present moment in this space with my cousins, you know. So with my cousins as a way for us to get to be together. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to get through, is to be able to be connected and to try to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to connect with one another. Where are we? We are in, it's trauma on top of trauma. I often say that, you know, there is no PTSD for Black folks because there has been no post. Mm-hmm. There has been no post. There has been no post-traumatic. It can't be a post-traumatic stress syndrome because we've had no time for post. It's been trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. Going way back, right, to when our ancestors were, enslaved and brought over here to this country against our will and broken up. And then when, and just the tragedy and the trauma that happened through that, right? And then when we were freed, freed, which we never really were, but when we were freed, it was just like, okay, now you can go. What? you know, and with no sense of all of this, you know, just awful ways in which that we were treated and brutalized and taken away from our families and all of that, and given nothing, right? Nothing, everything taken away from us, right? And then there basically was a legalized way of enslaving us through policing, through and not just in policing our bodies, but also in policing how we could move forward, right? So within our finances, how we could move forward in education and all of that. So all that trauma, just quick, right? And then just, you know, life. And now it's like what's happening in the present moment. It's been happening. As I said, I didn't watch the video. I saw the pictures. I didn't watch the video because I have that video playing in my head already. You know, I didn't need to see that particular one because I can just pull up too many other things that have already happened. That's the life of what it means to be Black, right? And then, as you said, on top of the COVID pandemic that just simply illuminated what was already happening, that the healthcare system and how it treats, or I should say how it doesn't treat Black people, right? And that we were, you know, we were not getting good healthcare. We couldn't get in. We couldn't, you know, and nobody takes us seriously, right? So those things are being compounded. So that's where we are, you know, and now it's just like, okay, we're in this present moment, and now the world is suddenly, I guess, woke about what we already knew. It's like, were you under a rock? Like, we've been, you know. So I'm going to put a comment there and pass it off to my cousins because it's ridiculous.
Right. So, Dr. Brandon, let's talk about that. Dr. Joy talked on this intergenerational, this is generational trauma, but it also feels like it's a communal trauma. We don't have to even look back 400 years. We can just look back 2 days.
Absolutely. And many of us, we've been experiencing trauma so long, it's become normalized. I mean, we literally have developed culture around being subjugated into this, you know, white supremacist, racist society that we live in, to the point where we used to call our culture the struggle. And we've kind of lost calling it the struggle over the last couple of years, but it has just been what it is, the struggle. And we say things like it is what it is, you know, we just gonna keep pushing through, et cetera. We've developed language around dealing with pain and trauma. And that's how far we've come into this. And the pain and trauma just isn't from the system. It just ain't from white folks. We have adapted it and put the pain and trauma on ourselves. And that is one of the biggest pain points that we don't talk about enough. Just right here in our own front yard, we've had shooting after shooting after shooting almost every night in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm terrified to even see what this weekend's going to look like. Would it be in the 4th of July? Would it be in hot? And a time for us to, you know, come together and be in collective, even though we're supposed to be socially distancing. That's hard when we are very communal people. I'm terrified to see what's going to happen, because that pain and that trauma has seeped over to this place of where we're hurting each other. And that's what we have to start, you know, working on, is figuring out how are we going to enter into our healing journey to make sure that we give our children an opportunity to live in community and have space where we're not causing this pain, and we are dealing with the stuff that has happened to us already. And we need to be able to do that on an individual and a collective level to the best of our ability. It is unfortunate what happened to George Floyd, and then it's happened to Breonna Taylor, and folks since then. Like, it's this nonstop kind of pressure that we get, where we end up losing our lives and end up being under this threat. There is no PTSD in the Black community. Even though as a clinician, I see a lot of diagnoses of PTSD. Now, unless I've seen a brother or sister that came out the military, I don't want to see another PTSD diagnosis, okay? What we're dealing with is complex trauma, if we want to use a mental health lens, but the stuff that we deal with is not in a DSM. And for folks who don't know what that is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, which is like the Bible of mental health disorders. There is no condition for what we're dealing with. We are a people, as Dr. Joy was talking about, that have literally been created. We came from enslaved Africans to become slaves in this world, and we've been admixtured and mixed up ever since. We are literally a GMO people. We are literally we are a creation. That doesn't mean anything that is against how our greatness is and what our culture is. But one of the things that we have to be able to be honest about is the part of trauma and how that has seeped into our culture and how we've developed culture around that. At some point, we have to evolve beyond that so that it doesn't continue to, show up in our spaces and in our places, and we continue to carry on this pain from one generation to the next. So I'll pause there and let Catrice go.
Yes, Catrice, please chime in, join in, especially you talk a lot about amplifying our voices and our present conditions where we are.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here, and I definitely agree and echo everything that's been said so far. Two of the things that I focus on in the work that I do is, number one, like you said earlier, naming it, calling a thing, putting a name to this white violence is what I call it, that we experience, that we have been experienced. And I don't call it white supremacy because there is absolutely nothing supreme about rape and murder and lynching and sodomy and pedophilia. And I could continue to go on with that list, but that has been the history and the legacy of how white people have treated Black folks in this country. And so one of the ways that I help us to better understand what we're experiencing is to really put language to it. And so I call it what it is. It's white terrorism. There's definitely nothing supreme about what white folks have done and what they're currently doing right now. And the other thing that I do to help somewhat offset, or I'm not even sure what the best language is, but one of the things I know as a clinician is that if you can't put your finger on the pain, you can't heal it. So you gotta name what's wrong. You gotta look at the symptoms, and you gotta put a diagnosis to it, and then you can begin to treat it. And so I use a term called weapons of whiteness. And there's a long list of these weapons of whiteness. Some of them you may know, like white fragility, white silence, white entitlement, things like that. But I've gotten creative over the years and went from having 20 items on this list to just yesterday, it's now up to 45. And the reason that I do that is because we know as Black people that these insults, these invalidations, these assaults are happening to us, but we don't always know what to call it. We can't always put our finger on it, but we know that it's happening and that it has been happening. And so I've been naming these weapons of whiteness so that Black and brown folks, Black folks specifically, can say, you know what, that was just, for example, white interrogation, we'll use that. And white interrogation is when white people ask you question after question after question, even after you've given them the answer. Mm-hmm. They interrogate, why are you in this space? What are you doing? Why are you driving this car? And all of those aggressive acts. And so I've given it that name so that when it happens, you can say, this is what's happening to me. I know what it is. I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. And then begin to do something about that interrogation. So I think, one of the most important things that I'm offering, Black folks right now is a way to name the violence and terrorism that we continue to face.
Thank you. Wow. So Dr. Brandon, we just, with Catrice talking about these things that we're naming, it's these consistent triggers, this consistent trauma that it's not like we broke a foot and you can heal it. It's right. Like we're still walking on the broken foot daily and asking and pretending to be okay. How do we, I know you talked in a piece that you actually wrote for the Spokesman about living a trauma-informed lifestyle.
Yeah.
How do we navigate in that space of once we've named it, but we're still breaking it? Our foot's still being broken.
Well, Catrice, Catrice set it up. The number one thing you have to do is be honest about what you're living in. If you're going to be in a state of denial and you're not going to keep it real, keep it 100 with yourself about what's going on and where you're at, you are already defeating your part of your purpose, right? So when we're able to be honest and open about it, that's the first step. The second step for me is finding balance and boundaries within it, because you need to be able to protect yourself and you need to be able to manage your time, your energy, your compassion, your accountability, what you're going to do for yourself versus what you're going to do for other people. You have to be able to balance that in a healthy way that fits you. And then lastly, I would say you need to develop consistent, constructive choices. And that depends on how you're doing it. What is your coping mechanism? What is your skill sets? What are your talents and genius that you're going to utilize to navigate through this system? As much as I want to disconnect from the system, we are a part of it at the same time. And that's one of the touchy, that's the rub when it comes to us, because we help make the system run functionally. And when we start to evolve and start to do what we need to do, then we start to disrupt the system, and then people start to take notice. And I think that's kind of what happened in response to George Floyd, is people started to take notice because they're like, uh-oh, these folks ain't playing no more. Now, there's a lot of other things that we need to do structurally and politically, etc. But that was a big wake-up call, quote unquote, for a lot of folks. And hopefully it was a wake-up call for us as well. So those are just 3 strategies that I believe that we need on our healing journey to make sure we're taking the best care of ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. And then Dr. Joy, he hit it for you too now. We're talking about care, self-care, which you deem as radical in our conversations about how we heal. Why is this self-care radical for us? And how do we get to a place where it is okay for us to want to go to a place of healing?
Yeah, well, as I have continued to say, it's like the revolution will be healing. And that, that our word freedom, and I mean, when I say our, and I mean particularly Black people, that our freedom has to include, it has to include us being well. I mean, holistically well, right? And because of the way trauma has shown up in our lives, we haven't had the freedom to be well, right? Both in terms of mental health, certainly in terms of physical health. I can say, in my own life, like I have, since I was in my early 20s, had high blood pressure, which I call high Black pressure, because, people talk about that it's hereditary. Yeah, it's hereditary, because my father was Black, and my mother was Black, and my grandmama was Black. So yeah, it is hereditary, right? So that's what it means, it was passed down. And so it's a radical act. Radical self-care is resistance, because the system does not want us well. Capitalism is set up for us to do all the things, take care of everybody, do everything. So we will be exhausted, and then we will turn on ourselves and we'll turn on each other, right? That's why it's set up. So it is a radical act for us to actually take care of ourselves. And our issues, my yoga teacher who does work around somatics, Black woman, the bomb, Nikki Myers, she says, our issues are in our tissues, right? Our issues are in our tissues. And so we have to be able to work that stuff out. And, the deal is that if we're hysterical about it, we're hysterical right now about it, it's historical. This stuff has already happened, right? And so that's the thing. We have to, this healing journey, I mean, last thing I'll just say about that is like this healing journey, nobody can heal for you. Nobody can heal for you, but we can't do it alone. You can't do it by yourself. But you got to do it. You got to take responsibility. But for us, it's a communal thing. We can't do it alone.
This piece of us not being able to do it alone. I hear it every day. I'm sure you all hear it. The number one question from someone on the outside is, well, how can I help? What do you need? What is the next step? And it almost feels like we're being oppressed again by having to now say what we need to fix us for something that we didn't break. What do we do for that? Who wants to chime in on that one?
I'm gonna let Catrice kick that off, because I already know she got about 50, and then we gonna come. I already know. I know my sister got about. I know she got about 50.
Oh, that is a loaded question, and yep, you're exactly right. Like, you know, it. The best thing that I can say to that is, it's almost like them saying, "Tell me how to stop abusing you while I abuse you." Like literally in motion, in progress, abuse happening. And at the same time, they're saying, tell me how to stop abusing you. And to me, that's sinister. There's something very psychologically wrong there. One of the things that I'm currently diving a little more deeper into and talking about in Black spaces, specifically with Black people and more specifically with Black women, is one of the things that I'm writing in my new book, which is called Weapons of Whiteness, and it is for Black people. And it speaks to something that Brandon talked about earlier, where we're not only dealing with, you know, the trauma of white terrorism, we're also then hurting ourselves and then hurting each other. Now there's violence against each other in our communities. And so one of the things that I'm suggesting is to detox from whiteness, because whiteness is toxic. There's no way to minimize that. There's no way around it. Whiteness is oppressive. It's violent. It's intrusive. It's pervasive. Wherever there's whiteness, there can be trauma, and there can be that terrorism that I talked about. And so I think one of the things that as Black people that we can do in whatever ways work for us, because the ways that work for Patrice are not going to be the ways that work for Dr. Joy, but detoxing from whiteness. So what does that look like? Well, you know, this may sound real trivial, but it's something that I've done. So for example, about 2 or 3 years ago, I looked at all the books on my bookshelf, and if they weren't written by Black authors, they had to go. Because there's white supremacy in those books too. I mean, white supremacy touches everything. And so another thing that I've done is taking a look at like what's in my home, what kind of artwork is there, what kind of, you know, pieces do I have in the home, and making sure that those are representative of me and my people and my culture. And so just trying to remove as much whiteness from your life as possible. And those are just 2 things. And, you know, you can do those 2 things if you're lucky enough to have a home. Because as we know, some of our brothers and sisters are on the street, and they ain't thinking about reorganizing, you know, books on their bookshelf. But I encourage Black people to find as many ways as they can to detox from whiteness, and not just literally like get away from white people, but white thought, white beliefs, the ways in which white folks do business. As an entrepreneur, I started about 7 years ago, really looking at all of the systems in place that are the rules, if you will, of how to do business. Well, whose rules are they? You know, and I shifted my whole business, you know, method to try to take out as much as that as I can, so that I can better serve the Black people who probably can't fit into that box of white supremacy as it's related to entrepreneurship. So, you know, there was this big craze about make 6 figures and, you know, hire a coach. And for a while, I was drinking that Kool-Aid, okay? I was trying to get them 6 figures and following those methods, and it never really felt right. It felt wrong. I felt like I was doing a disservice to my own people by trying to charge them, you know, $10,000 for a 10-week program. So, you know, just I think slowly paying attention to how whiteness is not only affecting us, but infecting us, and working to detox yourself from that in whatever ways that make sense for you.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack too.
If I could just
Dr. Joy? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to jump in, and this is real short and sweet, but my grandmother would say when I was, you know, we were younger, and she would pull up from the grocery store, and my cousins had taken her to the grocery store, and I would come out and I say, Grandma, do you want me to help you put the groceries in? And she'd look at me and she'd say, why are you asking me if I need you to help me to take the groceries in? You see that the groceries are here. If you wanted to help, you would just pick up the groceries and start bringing them in. You asked me because you didn't really want to do it, right? And so I think about that with the question that you've asked, right? When people are asking me, don't ask me what it is that I need you to do. Because when you really want to do something, you're going to just do it. And you know how to do it in right relationship without getting in the way, right? Without doing the most. And you also don't even have to announce it, right? It's just, you know how to do things. And to, you know, what I need people to do is to just show up and do stuff. I don't even need to know that you did it. Just let stuff start happening and you be like, what? How did I get that call? Or where did that thing happen? Stuff starts moving out the way. You know the levers to push. You know, get out the way and stop blocking and give up the privileges that you have. It's not that hard, actually. You know that you have gotten some undeserving things. Let go of those and move out the way. You don't have to ask. Think about where you're super comfortable and give up some of those comforts. That's a good place to start.
Yes.
And let's just start there. And you don't have to call and tell me that you gave it up.
Right.
Just do it, right? Just do that. That's a good place to start.
Ooh, can I add one thing right there? Just one tiny thing. So, you know, one of the things that I teach in the workshops that I do for white women to help them learn how to lay down their weapons of whiteness is this. If your child, your husband, your cousin, your grandmama, whoever, someone that you love dearly and care about was experiencing some kind of trauma or pain or hurt or were under attack, what would you do? And they can list a long list of things that I would jump in the way. I would put my body on the line. I would, you know, go take out a loan, and they give me this whole long list of things that they would do. But now you mean to tell me that you don't know what to do when I'm under attack? You don't know what to do when Black people in your community are under attack? The reason you don't know what to do is not necessarily because you don't know what to do. It's because you don't care. You don't care. And, you know, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Most white folks don't give a damn about Black people. And so when you don't care, you can't act. So I always say, you know, failure to act is failure to care.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Brandon, let's continue this part of this conversation.
I mean, how much more can I add?
There's
Also,
a general,
go ahead.
Sorry. I'm saying there's like a general numbness to Black suffering.
Absolutely. But again, we got to look at the people. You know, one of the things white folks like to do is quote Dr. King. And they love the quote of, you don't judge somebody by the color of their skin, but you judge them by the content of the character. And for Black folks, we haven't done that very well. Because if we are judging folks by the content of the character, that's what they do. They love to objectify us and look at us as an object until it hits them personal. And that's what has happened since George Floyd was murdered, is that it hit them personally, and now they feel like they need to do something, and now they're uncomfortable. So my suggestion is you need to sit in that place of discomfort, and you need to do the things that Catrice talks about, those 45 things. You need to work on those things. You know, one of the things that we've seen that's happened since then is all these white folks that are like getting in the face of Black people, and they're telling them what to do. That white interrogation, which has been classified by us as Karen, right? We have this Karen phenomenon that's been taking place with white women coming up telling Black folks where to be, where not to be, what to do, where not to do. That is what you need to work on, is that, and call that stuff out in those spaces when Black folks are not there. You don't need to tell me about it. You will be surprised how many LinkedIn messages, emails, and texts I've got from white colleagues saying, I'm so sorry this has happened, Brandon. What can I do? Is there anything that I do? My wife has even gotten, my wife she does mom blogging, and the white moms have hit her up on Instagram. We're so sorry. I said, baby, just respond with a Cash App. Let them send you some money. And guess what? She started doing that. They just start sending their money. And I said, if they don't know what to do, then they can figure it out that way and just go. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out. We'll do our strategies that we need to do to figure it out. It's not our job to help other people figure out how they can stop oppressing people or how they can feel better about the oppressive system that they have advantages in. You know, that's one of the things I don't get into this concept of white privilege. Okay, I talk about white advantage, and I credit Brother Minkara, who works at the Cultural Wellness Center, for giving me that language, because that is exactly what it is. And when you start to point out the advantages, it starts to change the paradigm how they think and how we think, because privileges come. Us on this line have privilege. We all have a high enough speed internet to even have this conversation. Okay, absolutely. That's a privilege. An advantage is being able to call the internet company, get your rate reduced, and not pay a bill because you are frustrated. That's something that the four of us might not have the leverage to do because we don't have that access or that availability. We have to be able to allow other people to deal with their discomfort and not feel the need to come in and make them feel comfortable, because that's the culture that has been created for us, is that we soothe the discomfort of other people and we heighten the pain of ourselves. We have some self-healing to do, and that does not include helping white people deal with their stuff, from my perspective.
So then how do we center ourselves in that, you know, given that we have, even from the Black community, we expect each other to be stronger than what we are. And so we're still trying to heal. How do we center ourselves in the midst of all of this, with someone coming at us from this end, talking about how can I help you? And this one, well, you were strong enough to pick up that bag by yourself. Who wants? Can I get a hand raised on this?
Ooh, you coming with all the loaded questions today.
We need this though.
I know. Well, you know what? There's so many answers to that question, but the one that just seems to be coming to me right now is the one thing that I think that we need to offer each other, Black people, more often than not, is compassion and grace. Because we're all fighting this war. We're all under attack. We're all facing this terrorism of whiteness. And you know, when you're in trauma or you're under attack, you're hypervigilant, you're irritable, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're on edge. And you know, a lot of us are walking around like that because we're not taking the time to do the things that Dr. Joy talked about in terms of, you know, caring for ourselves. And then there's this expectation, and it's been the expectation since 1619 that Black people just work, you know, that we're the mammy and that we're the workhorse and that we just constantly got to be doing and fixing and caring and taking care of folks. And so I think just being able to stop and pause and look at your brother and sister and say, you are fighting the same war I'm fighting. You are trying to resist the same terrorism that I'm trying to resist, and to be able to look at each other with eyes and hearts of compassion and grace. And so I am willing to give my brothers and sisters as much grace as possible, and sometimes to a default. Like sometimes I should have maybe pulled the plug, you know, like you've attacked me 10 times and I'm here for the 11th, you know what I mean? And so maybe I should have pulled the plug and just disconnected after attack number 5. But I keep trying to give that compassion and grace because I know all too well what they're experiencing. But that does not give us permission, because we're under attack, to attack each other. So I'm just going to say, you know, we need to try to give each other as much grace and compassion as possible, along with, at the same time, being able to value our own self-care, and to be able to have boundaries in place. We can't let people just walk all over us either.
We have a comment from Facebook, which also touches on what you were speaking on earlier, Catrice, about how we're trying to to heal, and or even, detoxify while some of us don't even have homes at this place. And we have someone who just asked, how can someone as a parent self-care while their children are in foster care? So they're fighting a battle to get their children back, and feeling suicidal. How do they get to that place where they can take care of themselves while still fighting for whatever issue they have that they're facing?
That is a great question. And it's hard because at this point, you are engulfed in a system that has your children, at the base of it. And it's a legal battle, so you don't have a lot of flexibility to do things. What I would say is two things. You need to get support with legal aid, whether that's your own lawyer or somebody who can fight for your rights and knows the legal system when it comes to child protection issues. That is going to be vital and very important. And when you work with those people, it's going to be important to be as honest as possible and do the things that they're asking you to do so you can get your children back. The second thing that I would say is find community, whether that's one person or that's 10 people. You need to get some support around you, because when you're navigating any type of legal battle, when you're doing it by yourself, it can be a very lonely place, and you can slip into deep depression, generalized anxiety issues, or worse, because you don't know the outcomes, and a lot of that is out of your control, especially if you're not doing the things that you need to do. So support is going to be important. And the third thing I would say is get connected to some type of healer, whether that's a mental health professional or some community healer, but you need to be working on decompressing and de-stressing your body, because you are dealing with a lot. And I don't know how many children this person has in the system, but just one is enough. And it is very hard. And when you have multiple children, sometimes they're all together, sometimes they're in many different places, and that can get very scary and very isolating. So, try to get as much help as possible, educate yourself on the legal process, and do what you're being asked to do to get your children back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to also add, I think, I want to be clear, particularly as we talk about self-care, even in that particular situation, and self-care period often is thought about as this kind of extra thing, as this, like, if you get a chance, get to it. It's like bubble baths and, wine, which I'm down for. I mean, that's, don't get me wrong. Like I'm here for a good manicure, pedicure. I'm down for that. And that is not all. When we're talking about radical self-care, it is not extra. It's mandatory. It is where we actually start. It is where you deserve. It is what you have to do, particularly when you are under such duress as fighting a legal battle, as in any kind of traumatic things, because, again, it's set up to make you think it's something extra and soft. Because if you actually are grounded and you're taking time to breathe and you're taking time to take care of yourself, then you're going to actually be in shape to be able to fight against the system. You're going to actually be able to be in shape to receive your children whenever they come back, right? You're not going to be so stressed out and exhausted and all over the place. So it's counterintuitive, and it wants to make you think that you don't get to take care of yourself, but that's a lie. It's actually one of the most important things that you can do and get help. So don't let the system make you think it's something that maybe one day you might get to do. It is something that you get to do right now. And it can be as simple as like just taking a minute, just taking a breath, just take your hand and put it over your heart and just breathe in for a minute. If that's all you get to do, that works, because you have healing power in your own hand. So just taking the time to say, I'm worth it. Don't be waiting to some great day, because that ain't gonna come. Our life is a whole bunch of stuff going on. So I just want to kill the myth that self-care is something that we're gonna do one day. No, we got to do that every day, and we get to prioritize ourselves.
How do we find power then, as we're talking about self-care, and we're taught that Black pain shouldn't be paid attention to in the same way because we're strong. We're 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. So many different things. There's a report, a study done in 2016 that showed that half of a sample of white medical students and residents thought that we were physically and physiologically stronger than our white counterparts. And so they treated us less. They gave us less medicines, less painkillers, less whatever it is. How do we empower ourselves or find power in our healing while we're being told that we're not broken?
I keep going first, so I was pulling back and let somebody else jump.
Yes, Brandon, please touch on that. And also the idea, because we're told to get over it. Whatever it is, we're told to get over it because we shouldn't be in pain.
Yeah, I mean, we're told to get over it, but we also, that's just culturally how we've adapted, is just to eat pain like Skittles. Like we just take in pain and we enjoy it, and it's a part of who we are, and it's a part of our resiliency in our culture. But it doesn't do us any good if we're not evolving beyond the pain. If we're just staying stuck, then what good does it do to us, right? You brought up the statistic about how medical students were less likely to treat us for pain medications. That act of racism actually might have saved us from being addicts to the opioid crisis that we have today. So believe it or not, that's one act of racism that actually probably worked in our favor. Is now we have found other ways to catch up to some of these other addicts. When we're talking about popping pills and sipping lean and all that type of stuff, it has found its way into our culture because that is the drug culture of today. But that act of racism, again, that happened in the 90s and in the early 2000s actually kind of assisted us. But we cannot allow the medical system or any other systems to treat us for the things that we have been dealt with. We have so many cultural resources and assets that we don't even know about. Sometimes we don't even realize that is a part of our mental wellness. Something like sighing, right? Now think about this. Black people sigh all the time. I can think of all these classic moments in my life where my grandma was just like, boy, right? That is breathing. That is a healthy act for your body to decompress. We don't think of it like that. We think of it as what? Attitude. Right. And we start to mislabel the things that we do to take care of ourselves. Things like, drinking hot toddies. Now, when I was a kid, when I got sick, my mom would make me a hot toddy. She wouldn't give me NyQuil. She would and for folks who don't know what a hot toddy is, it's usually some type of liquor, brandy, and some hot tea. She would give me that, some honey, lay me on the couch, sip the hot toddy out, pass out, wake up the next morning ready to go to school, right? Mm-hmm. Cold gone. That is a cultural remedy. Where did my mama learn that from? She learned it from her mama, who learned it from her mama, who was a domestic, who learned it from her mama. We have all these things already that we don't utilize or we don't respect enough and we don't go back to do with our healing. Things like yoga and stretching and things like that. That's stuff that we've been doing for a long time, right? It's become fashionable and trendy for other people because that's the capitalistic system we live in, but we can't displace what we do. The foods that we eat, some of it's unhealthy, some of it is healthy, but we don't want to touch it until it's till somebody makes it popular on TV and now we want to eat it again. We have to be able to get back to our cultural genius and evolve, because I keep using that term because we can't stay stuck in it. We have to, get with technology, get where we're at, and utilize our collective genius to heal and get better. We have these things. We have labels for them. We laugh at them. We use our humor as a way of coping with our pain all the time. That's when I bring up the Karen thing earlier. That's our funny way of talking about how white folks is always trying to control us, right? They have this concept of I'm white and I say so, so whatever I say and do, you need to follow it. And we ain't trying to hear that no more. Now, we've used social media to laugh at it and to navigate around it, but we know what that is. We didn't need an explanation for what Karen was. We knew exactly what it is. When the woman in Central Park who was choking her dog, when she was doing what she was doing, everybody that was Black knew what that was, because guess what? We have seen it or we have experienced ourselves, unfortunately. We need to get back to that. We need to understand what the language is around what we're doing, and we need to utilize those things as our healing practices. We don't need to go get medications from the doctor unless we have a serious injury, right? We might not need to go to a licensed mental health professional because most of the theoretical pieces that are trained aren't normalized on us. mental health therapy was not even made for people. It was made for affluent white men. That's really what it was. Talk therapy. Psychotherapy was made for folks who had mental illnesses that they didn't have definitions for, so they just threw them in asylums. So when we talk about this field and we talk about how people are trained in this field, if you don't have clinicians who have some kind of cultural center base and understand how to work around this stuff, and they're just a Black person who's been trained in psychoanalytic theory or Gestalt therapy or Adlerian, whatever it is, they might not do you any good either. So you need to make sure you have somebody who understands culture, who has some healing principles and practices to help you move forward. So that's I'm gonna get off my soapbox because I keep going. I'll let somebody else go.
I'd like to share one thing, and going into being in alignment with what Dr. Joy said earlier in terms of radical, and the term that comes to mind for me when I think about radical. And I think it was Angela Davis who said it's simply just grabbing things at the root, just really getting to the root of whatever the thing is that you're grabbing, the issue, the problem. And so one thing that I would like to share as a way to practice self-care and to do the healing work that we need to do is we need to, as Black people, be better at vulnerability. Brandon talked about it earlier, being so strong. I talked about it like we're a workhorse, we're going and going and going. But some of us act like it's the end of the damn world. Like we're gonna die if we just happen to find somebody to trust, to be vulnerable with. We don't always gotta be strong. We don't always gotta have the answers. We don't always gotta carry the load. And so I want Black people to just be vulnerable. Find at least one person that you can trust to have a conversation about how you're truly feeling. Not with all the coded language, not with all the, beating around the bush and hemming and hawing, but just say, you know what? I feel terrible. I'm not even sure why I feel terrible, but whatever it is, we're not good at being vulnerable. And part of the reason why is that we haven't been allowed to be vulnerable for centuries. There is this expectation that we work, that we stay strong, that we can't be soft, and especially Black women. Look, I'm working on that vulnerability thing right here in this house with my husband, because I came from strong Black women, generation after generation after generation, where, oh, you don't want to do that? That's all right, I got it. And I have to learn how to just let him have it. Just let him do it and not say anything about it. So that's one thing that I would say is, can you find at least one person that you can be vulnerable with, that you can trust, that you can talk about how you're feeling? And sometimes you're not even looking for a solution. Like you don't need a checklist of things to do. You just need to get it off your chest, because as we talked about earlier, that stress, it stays in our bodies. And one way to release that is to talk about it. And so I would offer vulnerability as a solution.
Okay. Dr. Joy, what else can we do? What one thing can we do when we tune out?
Just adding on to what my brothers have said, that and crying. We don't get to cry, right? It's like, do you know how much pain that we have seen? It's like we could cry. There's enough tears that are locked up, We don't even need nothing new to happen, right? There's enough tears to just let that out. And, so I tell people, I'll be like, have you cried today? And I'll be like, you need to cry at least every day. They'd be like, every day? I'm like, yeah, at least every day. And it's a bonus if you can get somebody to bear witness, to just bear witness. And not so, like what Catrice said, that where you can be vulnerable. And also, like, you're not looking for anybody to solve anything. You have the answers to your own problems. And it is just we just need somebody to bear witness, to signify, to remember that to not be confused about who you are. that you are amazing, awesome, and brilliant. You just might be having a hard time. It's okay. I'm not confused. You ain't got to be all the things right now. You can just, go ahead and fall apart, do whatever you got. Because, I think that that's the thing, that the way that internalized racism shows up, that it tells us that we have to be perfect. And perfect is this idea of something that's not perfect, that is actually grounded in what Catrice called white violence, right? That's not us, that is everything that's not us. And so what I say is that, no, what we want to do is be about Black excellence. And Black excellence is not about perfection. Excellence isn't about everything being in place. It's about showing up in love. It's about intention. It's about how we do a thing. You can see your grandma, make sure it's done right now. And right is not about perfect. It's about, did you make sure you were being thoughtful? Were you doing loving? Were you being kind? Did you ask me? It's when you walk in the door, how you doing? How's your mama? Like, that's excellent. Or did you lose your mind and you just walk up in here and you ain't say hi to nobody, and that ain't excellent. That ain't what we do. You ain't, as y'all grandma said, did I sleep with you last night? You ain't just come up in here and you ain't say nothing to nobody. What are we doing? That's not excellent. So we know what excellence is. So it's that thing. We have to give each other that kind of grace to just say, okay, you struggling today. All right, still love you, but how you doing, boo? And keep it moving.
So we have vulnerability, we have crying, bearing witness. Dr. Brandon, is there one thing that we can do when we get off this conversation today?
I think valuing ourselves is a huge thing that we can do. And it just goes along with what has already been stated, is we don't value ourselves. And when we do, it's through the eyes or through the voice of someone else outside of us. And one of the biggest things you can do for your own mental wellness, mental health, is to value who you are and not allow other people to dictate who and how you are or who you're supposed to be. And unfortunately, as Black folks, we have been able to allow other people to validate our existence through what we can do for them versus what we actually do for ourselves. So that's what I would add.
Wow. I want to just touch briefly, in terms of this vulnerability and bearing witness, when we think of the concept of Black Lives Matter and valuing ourselves, all we have stated is that we matter. I watched that Michael Che Netflix special. I remember watching it right back a few years ago, watched it again. It's even more relevant now when he's like, we didn't ask to be more powerful or anything else. We just wanted to matter. What does that say about us collectively when that's legitimately the request or the statement or the demand, I guess, at this point? I know, I keep coming with the heavy.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
Well, I'd like to chime in a little bit on that.
Yes.
Oh gosh, that's true. And in the same lane, I hate to use this word, but it's kind of pitiful at the same time that after so many years of giving this country our blood, sweat, tears, our bodies, our creations, our innovations, and every form of excellence that we could offer to them, we still don't matter. And we're still just trying to get the bare minimum to matter. And so, at some point, going back to what Brandon said, we have to make sure that we matter to each other, because we may never get to the space and place where we matter to other people. And so we have to get to that space and place where we matter to each other. And then that goes to the work of the whole internalized racism and the, intra-community violence that we're seeing and experiencing and have experienced. And so I personally have moved away in my own way. of detoxing from whiteness. Now, again, I have the privilege to work from home. I have the privilege to be an entrepreneur. I have the privilege to pick and choose when I want to expose myself to toxic whiteness. So since I work from home, I'm in the house like, 90% of the time. I don't have to go out and expose myself to the Beckys and the Brads if I don't want to. But when I go out, talking about self-value and doing my own work and doing my own detoxing and learning more about my culture and who I am and what I deserve and what my people have done, really spending time behind the scenes, enriching myself with the truth about Black people as a collective. It empowers me when I go out into the world to take up space. Just a simple thing of taking up space. And I know that all of you on here have probably experienced somebody reaching over you at the grocery counter, like you're not standing there. They have cut in line like they don't see you standing in line. And so collectively, we have allowed white folks to do that to us, to step over us, to butt in line, to get in place before we get in place. And so, some of my friends, when I tell them how I act in the airport, they're like, Catrice, we could just see you doing that. And, I break shoulders at the airport, okay? Oh, I know you see me coming, I see you coming, but I'm in the right of way, as they say. And you want me to move? I'm not moving. So if we gotta do this all the way through the airport, that's what we're gonna do, because I refuse to concede. And so something as simple as when you're out in the world and navigating in spaces and places is to not cower and to step back and to allow white folks to continue to take up all the space. Because if you let them, they will consume the hell out of you. So, one of the things is just honoring, just our physical presence. And we have a right to be here. We have a right to be in this line. We have a right to be first. And so I'm taking up all the space that I can take up. And sometimes I do what they call the man spread. And the man spread is when men take up space and they just spread all out and they get, they just take up all the space. Sometimes I just square up and take up as much space as I can, and then dare folks to get in my space. I think that's valuing our existence. It's valuing our right to be here. And if I could just go back to that one thing that I think will be very helpful for us is we got to start telling the truth. We got to start telling the truth about who we are, how we feel, what we need to do. And just really having some straight up truthful conversations. So yeah, I'm taking up all the space.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catrice. This has been an amazing hour of healing and being able to unpack a little bit as we continue to move forward. I would love at this point, as we close out, for you to offer some parting words, a thought, a quote, a sentence that we can walk away with and hold on to as we continue this journey, since it's not a one-day thing for healing.
Mm-hmm. I'll go. I can start it off. So one thing I like to say is, again, healing is not a destination. It is a journey. And one thing that you can do on this journey is live your life with purpose, on purpose. And I think that when we start doing that, you will start to see changes take place that are constructive, positive, and lead to balance, healing, and justice.
Thank you. Dr. Joy?
I would end where I began, which is revolution will be healing. I believe that the revolution will be healing, and we're in that revolution, and healing is not some cute thing, just so we're clear. So we're going to feel some kind of way and feel we're going to have those moments of relief and good things, but also all this bubbling up and things that are happening. That's a part of the healing process as well. And so we're in it, and I believe that we will win. I still believe that we're going to win. And I'm hopeful, and the revolution will be healing. So welcome to the revolution, y'all.
Thank you. And Catrice?
Well, one of the things that I say is live free, die trying. And I would encourage Black people specifically on listening to us today is to just answer this simple question. What would it look and feel like if I were free? What would it look and feel like if I were free? Free from oppression, free from violence, free from white terrorism, free from being under attack, and literally take out a piece of paper, make a list. And what kind of life would you be living if you were free? And as many of those things as you can do those. Whatever it takes to get to that place of being free and liberated, do that. And when you can't do it alone, then find the people who can support you so that you can live free.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Stefanetta Harmon with the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. Please find everyone's contact information on this Facebook post, and we will also have it on our website at thespokesman-recorder.com. These are 3 individuals that you will definitely want to connect with for their resources, their books, and their healing. Thank you so much.